Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Monday, March 31st, and it's episode 349, and we're going to talk about how war is a massacre. So, war, a massacre of people who don't know each other for the profit of people who know each other but don't massacre each other. It's a quote by Paul Valery. And before I continue, you might be hearing rain. All of a sudden, there's a really strong storm rolling through, and but because of time, I got to do the recording now. So he was a French poet. Paul Valery was a French poet, essayist, and critic, and he lived around World War One. And basically, he was making a commentary on how uh, somehow we are constantly in war, but do people ever stop and think that the war is being fought for the profit of people we don't know? Now, they give us reasons, people tell us the reason why we have to fight a war, but in reality, most people have no idea why they're fighting in a war. It's sort of like a fact of life. The government calls for a war, and so you got to go and you got to fight in this war. But it's getting kind of ridiculous. As I said last week, there's the United States alone is responsible for 20 million dead and counting. And I'm sure that's a conservative estimate as well. If you think about it, wars are started with lies. So what is it really for? Why are people actually fighting in this war? I mean, think about what was Afghanistan for? Do people even remember? We were in there, the United States was in there for 19 years. For what? And then all of a sudden we just left all the equipment behind, all the weapons behind. Some people say intentionally. And it was just so casual, like, oh yeah, we got to fight in Afghanistan, and all of a sudden we're not. And I did an episode on a movie that was made about it. It was called The Covenant, and a lot of people were left behind who were promised help in return for collaboration. And those people are being hunted down by the people who took over after America left. I mean, that country is so far worse off than they were before the United States went in. And I've said before that the United States did not have to invade Afghanistan. They could have hired some bounty hunters, some people who would hunt down the people who they were looking for, supposedly Osama bin Laden, and you wouldn't have to bomb the entire country. But we did anyway, right? And that country is worse off. Ukraine is even worse, right? So many people are killed. An entire generation of Ukrainians are dead. And now we're going to do something in Yemen. It's like it never stops. Um, and if you do a little bit of digging, you realize that none of this is what you think it is. And especially, I feel bad for, I say this mostly because I'm saying it in service of all the people who are sent overseas. I mean, they go there maybe sometimes with ideological beliefs. And once they get there, they realize it has nothing to do with that. And then bad things happen. And, for a lot of them, they become psychologically damaged as a result, the whole PTSD thing. And I mentioned last week that when I was younger, people used to ask me if we got into a war with Korea, who would I fight for, Korea or the United States? I kept thinking about it over the weekend that really it was a loyalty test, right? Where are your priorities? Is it with another country or is it with the United States? And, I always had a hard time answering the question, not because, you know, I would fight against the United States, but because it was such a weird question. Like, why would the United States go to war with Korea? It just it didn't make sense. And I didn't know how to answer. It's like, why would we go to war? It's so ridiculous. But then no one is asking any kind of questions when it comes to Israel and its interference with the foreign policy of the United States. I mean, it's being said by many people, I'm not the only one, who says that uh, the foreign policy that we currently have is not the foreign policy of the United States, it's the foreign policy of Israel. And as a result of following their uh, policies, we have a world in chaos on the brink of global war. And if Trump is really playing 5D chess, man, he's gotta make those moves quickly. Otherwise, we have to just think that he doesn't know what he's doing, and that his what he's accustomed to doing, how he talks, the way he talks, is not healthy for the world. It's hard to know how to make plans if the person who has so much power in the world just casually says things as part of a strategy. It's very difficult. And so segue into all of this war talk. Um, and we have to realize that it's not just me. In the United States, the approval ratings for Trump, after being really high, are coming off, right? Because he said and he promised that he was going to bring peace, and people loved it. And now he's pro-war. He's bombing Yemen as if they could ever fight back. And it's not, and as the Ron Paul Institute, Ron Paul and Danny McAdams say, it's not like they've been attacking Americans either, but they're doing it because they're being asked to by Israel, primarily to get the United States into a war with Iran. And it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, Trump, he should just simply say no. And it's really hard to understand why he can't. Like I said, he's not going to run for election again, although there are rumors of him doing a third term, but that's ridiculous. He shouldn't do it. He is too old, which makes me wonder, is he getting senile? Is that's why he's unable to have a consistent policy, why he can't just talk like normal people, right? I don't care about this whole deal thing, just be consistent, uh, operate according to a principle. I mean, I wouldn't mind so much if he had a principle, and so that no matter what he said, what he actually did was consistent with a principle of peace. And then we have to imagine that, of course, young people don't want to fight. Young people don't want war. That's why they voted for Trump, right? That's why young people are siding more against the neocons, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And of course, then people who are in charge of the media then paint these, you know, people who are pro-peace as being far right-wing isolationists or whatever. And that is simply not the case. Young people are the ones who are going to have to fight in that massacre, and they don't even know why. It's not their business. And so I was thinking how, especially when I was a kid, the people who went to Canada were labeled as cowards. Maybe some of them were, but some of them also knew that it was a lie, that the war was a lie, and they weren't going to participate in that lie. And if you think about a little bit more, sometimes these wars happen simply because some companies here in America don't like competition from competitors who do things better than them. And then you have another group of people who want the resources in another country without buying them, right? Guaranteed contracts to do mining, to do digging, to do drilling, whatever, and then they don't want to have work out a normal trade deal, and so they get the plebeian, that would be us, to do the dirty work, right? To get the poor people to do the dirty work. It almost makes me sad when I see parents celebrate that their children are going to some military academy or that they've enlisted, not because um, I'm anti-military, but it's because they're signing up and they're now going to be cannon fodder, right? They're going to be used, they're going to be abused, not for the country, but for some wealthy, connected person who doesn't want to have a fair deal with someone in a different country, but because they have such a superiority complex, they think they're too good to have a deal with someone in another country. And so this is why, my reservation with Trump is that it's a cult of personality, right? So people are not so much uh, fans of Trump because he has a consistent policy based on a good principle, but rather it's just they follow him because it's kind of a cult. And it's unfortunate that he has no principles, at least none that I can actually see. He'll say whatever comes to the top of his head and not worry whether it conflicts with things that he's said before or in other places and other contexts. He just does not care. So I want to think that he is a good person, but I know at least he's better than the alternative that we had just a few months ago. But it's very difficult to think and see, especially after you've been bombing a group of people and killing women and children. It just, I don't know, it becomes harder and harder to think that he is actually playing 5D chess. I mean, I think you can do certain things without all of the bombing, but here we are. And so, is all of that pro peace stuff, ending all the wars, was that just talk? I mean, where is it now? Back in episode 32, I said that censorship is protection for bad ideas. That was near the beginning of this channel. So, censorship, protection of bad ideas. Can we even have a debate now? Do we want a debate? Can we even debate? Right? These days, various countries, people are being deported, being arrested for the things that they say, not the things that they do, not the vandalism or theft or any of this stuff, but for the things that they say. Right? I was talking to someone, and they said that every morning people come by his establishment and they try to sell stolen goods, right? So they robbed a store, looted a store, and then they wander around selling what they stole to make money, right? So if you ever wondered when those looters would run out of the store with armful of stuff, it's not even like they check the size or, you know, no, they don't have to because they're just going to sell it. And just getting as much as you can becomes the important thing. So you have looters, but we're deporting people and harassing people for speech. And so this anti-Semitism thing that everyone keeps talking about, it's the new racism, right? Like it used to be that if you said something offensive, people called you a racist. Now, if you say something offensive, you're an anti-Semite, and it's really over the top, right? It's shutting down debate. It's censorship, right? We're not allowed to have a debate. We're not allowed to entertain different ideas to try to get deeper, get to the bottom of something. And so that if there is censorship going on, whoever is trying to censor is doing a bad thing, and maybe they're protecting the bad idea, right? So uh, if you have the power to shut down debate, you're going to do it to protect your weak ideas in the face of really good ideas. And so war in and of itself is a really bad idea. So who's pushing the war? Who is going after people who are anti-war? Uh, and then you begin to see the cast of characters materialize before your eyes. Now, part of what's going on in the United States is a resurgence of what's called mercantilism, right? Where all of the things that you need for self self-sufficiency of your country, right? You're going to conquer and then possess and own these areas. This is why Trump is talking so much about, just taking Greenland or buying Greenland or bribing everyone in Greenland to vote in favor of joining the United States, right? It's a mercantilism, right? Uh, it's sort of a nationalism. It is isolationism, right? So in verse 37, excuse me, episode 37, wow, episode 37, I talked about isolationism versus war. And I always tell people, I'm not an isolationist. I'm pro peace, pro life for everyone, pro free trade, right? Isolationism is rather a Marxist thing. I have from chapter 1 of the Communist Manifesto, in that little pamphlet, page 12 to 13, it says, in place of the old local and national seclusion and self-sufficiency, we have intercourse in every direction, universal interdependence of nations. And as in material, so also in intellectual production, the intellectual creations of individual nations become common property. National one-sidedness and narrow-mindedness become more and more impossible. And from the numerous national and local literatures, there arises a world literature. And so Marx is complaining that countries are no longer self-sufficient. They're talking with other countries. They're trading with other countries. How dare they? Right? Uh, and so that's basically what Marx is saying. Marx advocates isolationism. Communism advocates isolationism, not capitalism, not freedom, right? And clearly, what Marx is saying is not freedom, it's not free trade. And I just want to end this episode with Jeff Deist. He used to be the head of the Mises Institute. Now he works for Monetary Metals as a consultant. He used to be Ron Paul's chief of staff when Ron Paul was in Congress. And whenever I listen to him, it always kind of picks me up. I met him once a couple of years ago at the Washington Ron Paul conference. It was kind of cool. He made fun of the fact that I was carrying around a camera, not taking pictures with my phone, but whatever. Um, but he gave a speech at the recent Mises conference, and he basically pushed back against a lot of people, or several people, who were complaining about Trump. He's like, look at the bright side, right? Instead of looking at the glass and saying it's half empty, look at it as half full. Did he say that, or I'm mixing up things? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But he put a positive spin on everything. He basically said that pretty much every political or every president we've had of late hates Americans, hates people, hates the commoners, but Trump does not, right? And so you take what you can get. Obviously, some of his policies are horrible, but he is thinking, and he's putting in the national conversation some ideas which, when Ron Paul ran for president, were just so ridiculous. But now, because he's saying it and because of who he is, it's getting traction, right? Like, let's check out the gold in Fort Knox. So, for all of his flaws, we should appreciate that he's not part of the deep state and that he has to maneuver within it. And he rightly says, Jeff Deist rightly says, he's not Ron Paul, but we got to keep pushing that conversation. And so, because of the way the political system is set up, right, it's not, uh, we don't mimic and imitate what everyone else is doing, but rather we use the Republican Party to push the old right, to have a new old right. The new old right would be the Republican Party up until the 1950s, where they were very much pro-peace, was totally against entangling alliances, staying out of the wars of Europe, which of course we no longer do. We're in the middle of everything. And so he's saying basically we have to revive and bring people back to that small government, uh, stay neutral, trade with everyone kind of arrangement. And I totally agree that we have to keep pushing. You know, Trump is going to let us down. Trump is going to make us really feel like, oh man, he's just like everybody else, but he's not. And so we have to continue to push the conversation so that people will continually talk about these things, recognize these things, so that they are, so that we don't slip back to the way things might have been if Trump was not elected. That's it for this episode. I will talk to you next time.